As many of you are aware, the news has been pretty bleak recently, in the past 200-300 years. Listen, but this weekend, there was one story that was so disturbing, so dark, even the news couldn't handle it.
Jon Stewart called out MSNBC, and this time, it was not for bad reporting, but something far worse. The media loves to call itself the watchdog of democracy. It is meant to hold power accountable and deliver facts, but it does the opposite. Jon Stewart took a shot at MSNBC for pretending to protect the public from disturbing content while pushing its narratives. MSNBC refused to display an image shared by Donald Trump, which it described as violent, disturbing, and dehumanizing.
In our editorial discussions this morning, we were asked not to show the image from this video because of its violent and disturbing nature.
Video, which we are intentionally choosing not to show you.
We're not going to show because of how disturbing it is.
I was extremely disturbed to see this.
Horrible, horrible, violent imagery.
Violent and dehumanizing imagery.
We're only going to show you a clip of this briefly.
All right, that's enough. Let's take it down.
To see it at all.
It sounds serious, except it wasn't. They have shown worse clips and images on the news, so it does sound over the top. MSNBC hyped it like it was not something they could show on the news. Take a look at this next clip.
I can't imagine how devastating this footage must be.
Former President Donald Trump shared a video, this one, on his Truth Social account featuring an image of President Joe Biden hogtied on the back of a pickup truck.
They chose to exaggerate the impact of a doctored meme. Yes, it was not right, but calling it disturbing and refusing to show it looks weird. And this is why.
That's what was so disturbing and dehumanizing. You wouldn't show it on television and an airbrushed Biden decal on the back of a truck?
He has a point. The media doesn't cover or blur the news when it comes to violent issues, so it definitely raises eyebrows. He also points out how hypocritical they are.
Aren't you the same networks that show reruns of 9/11 every year? I mean, I don't think it's great that Trump is posting things like this, but it's not like people really think Joe Biden was tied up in the back of the truck.
News media have shown devastating footage of wars, natural disasters, and other atrocities. But suddenly, a doctored meme is too much for the public to see. It raises questions like, are they protecting the public or protecting their narrative? He doesn't stop there. He also talks about how weird it is to treat this meme as a genuine threat to democracy.
It's a doctored image, but it's plastered on the tailgate of the pickup truck. So if you're driving behind it, it would appear as if Joe Biden were actually restrained on the vehicle's flatbed.
If you think that's really Joe Biden tied up on the back of the pickup truck, I don't know that you have the mental acuity to be operating a motor vehicle.
Is the news so out of touch that they think people can't tell the difference between satire and real news? Or are they using this confusion to make their coverage more dramatic? The bigger issue is how it plays into the spread of misinformation. Jon Stewart points out that new technology, like AI, is already making it harder to tell what's real and what's fake.
If you do think that, I should also probably explain to you that trucks also don't actually have testicles. It's just a novelty item.
Sure, it's a funny line, but it cuts deep. The media's obsession with trivial issues distracts people from what really matters. Instead of focusing on memes, they should be investigating the root causes of disinformation and holding real power accountable.
There is technology out there in the world that really does blur the line between reality and tailgate art. But those are mostly AI generated. Your fake Joe Biden robocall that tells New Hampshire voters not to vote. Your Chicago mayoral candidate glorifying police brutality. Your Donald Trump dropping by the neighborhood for a stew pan. Look how comfortable he seems.
He also took a shot at the Morning Joe co-hosts, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, who are known for their criticism of Trump. They are warning everyone about this huge threat, yet they decided to go to Mar-a-Lago just days after criticizing him. Jon Stewart calls them out for shaking hands with the very man they once called a threat to democracy.
On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Because you said he was Hitler.
If there was ever an award for public contradictions, Joe and Mika just made it to the list. They went from calling Trump a dictator to shaking hands with him.
We talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets.
Oh, I bet you really laid down the gauntlet, Joe. I bet you walked in there and just let him have it, didn't you, Joey? We've learned nothing! Even those putting up resistance to Trump's agenda don't seem to understand who they're dealing with.
When you compare someone to a fascist, you typically don't RSVP to their party. Let's pretend that the meeting wasn't awkward.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Republicans are playing chess and the Democrats are in the nurse's office because they glued their balls to their thigh. The election that we just had was a repudiation of the status quo, an overly regulated system that is no longer responsive or delivering for the needs of the people or their beloved beheaded squirrels. Oh, R.I.P. Peanut.
He couldn't have said it any better.
The president nominates, the Senate confirms.
We're a check and balance. We're there to be a guardrail.
The Senate has a constitutional obligation to advise and consent on this nomination.
The Constitution does give the president power to adjourn the House and Senate on extraordinary occasions.
To unilaterally install his most controversial nominees and bypass the Senate confirmation process entirely.
That is our government in a nutshell.
He is basically pointing out that the idea of checks and balances is nice in theory, but what if those checks don't really check anything at all? What if you get someone like Matt Gaetz, and all of a sudden, advice and consent doesn't mean what it's supposed to? That is something they need to think about.
Republicans exploit the loopholes. Democrats complain about the norms over and over and over, and it has ghastly consequences. Remember when President Obama nominated Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court? Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refused to give that a vote, saying, well, it's only one full year before the election. It's too close. Now, you could make a case that Obama could violate the norm, say the Senate failed their advice and consent, and appoint him anyway, and see whatever happens. Fight.
Jon is not just criticizing the system for fun. He's pointing out how both sides play the game. Republicans have figured out how to play the system with loopholes, while the Democrats are crying foul about the norms being broken. The whole system has become a battle of who can cheat the hardest, not who can play by the rules. It's a reminder that politics, with the way it works now, isn't about playing by the book. It's about figuring out how to bend or break every rule to get what you want. And when Jon Stewart calls it out, it's funny, but it's also sadly true. What's your take on Jon Stewart calling out MSNBC? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.